Thank you, Brother Michael, and good evening, brothers and sisters. Well, brothers and sisters, a new series. I'm thrilled to bits. Zechariah would not have been my own choice, by the way, but the arranging brethren felt that because of the character of the study, perhaps it adds a bit of variety to what we've done before. This probably would be the best way to go. And because I'm always an obedient fellow and I do all the AB say, I said I'd do Zechariah. And I am absolutely thrilled to bits. Because you see, brothers and sisters, this was my first study ever in the truth. This was the first book of the Bible that I ever mastered. And it came about because Brother Peirce was opening up a new class. He became my father in the truth, and quite seriously my father, which I thought was an emotional thing. I found out it was for real. So I had to do what I was told. And he said, I'm starting up a class of Zechariah. You will be there every Tuesday night of the week, and I want to see your Bible every Sunday before we go into the meeting. And he kept that religiously up, looking at my Bible, making sure I had it all marked up. Now, that was only just over 50 years ago, so I remember it all. I tell you, I don't remember it all. So I did it again. I'm starting to do it again, and I've had an absolutely wonderful couple of weeks just getting my thoughts together on this particular prophecy. So I am really looking forward to this. But before the class, look. Now, Andy mentioned this, brothers and sisters. This is Putin's dream of a new superpower. Now, brothers and sisters, I know you've heard this 1,000 times. But I am so excited. I am so excited and I'm frightened. Because I reckon that we are absolutely at the door of the coming of Christ. I really mean that, brothers and sisters. Look at this. Just look at this. Here's Putin's dream. An empire or a superpower which stretches from Eastern Europe right over to the borders of China. And he doesn't need to include Europe, does he? Because he knows that with the present state of Europe and all its instability, if he can establish that territory under his control, Europe is a lame duck. He knows that, brothers and sisters. And you know what Brother Thomas said? The future movements of Russia are notable signs of the times, he says, because they're predicted in the scriptures as the truth. The Russian autocracy in the plenitude of its power on the verge of dissolution is the image of Nebuchadnezzar standing upon the mountains of Israel, ready to be smitten by the stone. When Russia makes its grand move for the building up of its image empire, let the reader know that the end of all things at present constituted is at hand. And salvation will be for those who not only look for it, but who have trimmed their lamps by believing the gospel of the kingdom under the obedience of faith and the perfection thereof meet for repentance. Brothers and sisters, just absorb the power of that. Now, why do we say this is an outstanding sign? Well, you ought to know. You read Ezekiel 38 today. That was our daily reading, brothers and sisters. Now, you don't have to be a political journalist to tell the scenario of what he intends to do. You'd have to be a dope not to know what's in Putin's mind. Because you see, brothers and sisters, you may not be able to read those, probably you can, but I have difficulty reading the names of those states of the old Russian republics who broke away from the USSR a few years ago. He's going to absorb them all back. And they are ready for it. But many of them are ready for it because it hasn't worked. They are not working well on their own. They are not, brothers and sisters, and many of them are leaning heavily back towards Russia, and Putin knows that. But every time you look up there and you see a name with S-T-A-N on the end of it, that means that that is a Muslim country. Now think of it. You don't have to be an Einstein to work this out. Here he has at least 6 Muslim countries down there in what is known as the underbelly of Russia. That belly is full of Muslims. Now, how on earth is he, from a nation like him, even though they're turning back to orthodoxy Christianity, how on earth would he ever be able to weld those countries together? There is only one way, brothers and sisters. There is only one way. There is no other way. A common enemy. There's no other way that he's ever going to woo a Muslim by any other means. But there he will offer them the obliteration of God's people. He will think an evil thought. And you say, well, is this building up to the time of the end? Imagine Brother Thomas seeing that. Just imagine Brother Thomas seeing that in the daily paper, brothers and sisters. Now think for a moment. Who among you out there believes that this world can go another 12 years? Who could believe that? With all you know about what's going on. When the whole world, the whole strata of society, brothers and sisters, is tottering on the brink. Up and down, any minute it's going to collapse. It's all going to go under their feet. Who could ever believe that this society, this world, could go on for another 12 years? Climatically, economically, politically, socially, any way you like to think. Well, Mr. Putin has just got a renewal of his tenure for 12 years. Now, I don't want you people to go around saying that John Martin says that Mr. Putin is the Gog. I don't know. But he's got another 12 years. He's taken over again from his deputy that steps aside for him. And everybody knew he would. It's conceivably possible, brothers and sisters, that we are looking at the Gog. Think about that. Well, I can't see us going 12 years without this catalyst coming upon the world. And the only way he's going to do this is to sacrifice God's people. He will think an evil thought. And what chance will he have? We'll have a look at the map. Measure the size of Israel against that, brothers and sisters. Ezekiel said in today's reading, he shall come like a cloud to cover the land. And you know how many people are in those nations which are hard to pronounce with the S-T-A-N on the end of them, the Muslim nations? You know how many people's in there? 68.7 million. Of which there is 55 million Muslims. Now just picture the juggernaut of Soviet Russia, nearly 60 million Muslims, joined to Catholic Europe. Oh, by the way, and the Pope is now sending overtures. Where, could you imagine this? Do you know who he's getting friendly with? Ahmadinejad in Iran, of all places. What is their common interest? Oh, brothers and sisters, this is exciting. Look, when the Jews went back to that land, we said it was the greatest sign of Christ's coming. It's no longer the greatest sign of Christ's coming. It is not. The greatest sign of our Lord's coming, brothers and sisters, is not their return to the land, it's their survival. Their return to the land said he must come. Rather, he will come. Their survival says he's got to come. Because we know that David was told, I will plant them in that land and they will move no more. Now, what can 7 million people do against a cloud that will cover the land like that and add Europe over there to the left, to the right-hand side? What on earth is 7 million people going to do about that? I'll tell you what they won't do. They won't win a 6-day war. And the battle will carry right up to the gates of Jerusalem, and 2/3 of the Jewish population of that city will perish. And they'll be on their knees, brothers and sisters, with the valleys around Jerusalem running with blood. And when Isaiah says, and when the enemy shall come in like a flood, I will lift up a standard against him, and the Redeemer shall come to Zion. That's quoted in Romans 11. All that Romans doesn't say is the prefix, when the enemy shall come in like a flood. Brothers and sisters, we have precious time left. And I'm going to ask all of you at the beginning of this class, as we try to get excited about these things, and we will get excited about them, I'd like every member of Enfield to listen. There are 2 things we need, brothers and sisters, to survive what's coming in the world. Not only in the political, social world, but in our ecclesial world. It's not a pretty scene, brothers and sisters, and there's some rude shocks coming. Some very, 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 very rude shocks that I know about. What we're going to need, brothers and sisters, is stability and security in this meeting. We want every brother and sister, if they do have a difference, if they do have a problem, to bury it. To love one another with all our heart and soul. And to do our level best to maintain in this meeting a level of dignity of worship, of sincerity and truth and honesty to each other, the love of our God and the love of our brothers and sisters, and a resistance to change. Don't change. And we will survive, brothers and sisters, if we do that. It may take a big effort. We're going to have big challenges. They're coming. We won't avoid them. We will not avoid them. They're coming and they're going to shake us to the foundation. I'm not being melodramatic, brothers and sisters. What's coming is going to be far more dramatic than ever I could portray from this platform. Believe me. Just believe me. I'm worried stiff. But we love each other. Our ecclesia has worked together well. There are people coming to our seminars, to our lectures. The brethren and sisters are pulling together to try and teach those people the truth. Don't change, brothers and sisters. Stick to the old paths, the well-trodden paths of where this book has taken us in the past and has meant so much to us in the future. I make that appeal to you all at the beginning of our class, and we'll do our best in this class we possibly can to excite you with this book. Because you see, this is we're getting back, of course, we'll go back to start the whole thing now. This book is known, brothers and sisters, in the Bible as the apocalypse of the Old Testament. It's like a miniature apocalypse because it's visionary. It's full of visions. It's full of very colourful visions. Visions that are absolutely full of meaning, absolutely full of meaning. And they're not hard to decipher. You know, you get all the clues either side of Zechariah, both in the Old and New Testament, where they're all related. You can say, well, they're related back here and they're related up there. So you haven't got any, you're not walking a blind path. You've got searchlights everywhere in this book to tell you where you're going. And we read the psalm tonight, didn't we, about the return from Babylon. And they returned, brothers and sisters, after the 70 years. And there were two periods of 70 years. There was, first of all, this period, from BC 506 to BC 536. And that dated, brothers and sisters, from the first invasion by Nebuchadnezzar against Jerusalem. The captivity began then. There were no less than 6 deportations of Jews out of Jerusalem before the city was finally levelled to the ground by Nebuchadnezzar. He took out a series of people, 6 of them, into Babylon, one after the other. Well, the first one was in BC 606. And 70 years later, Babylon was gone. And Cyrus was on the throne of Persia and issued a decree for the Jews to return back to the land. 70 years, which Jeremiah had prophesied. But there was another 70 years. And that was from BC 586, which was, of course, the end of Jerusalem, to BC 516, when the temple was actually built. From the very time that Nebuchadnezzar set that building alight and absolutely razed it to the ground, 70 years later they commenced to rebuild it. That's the faithfulness of our God, brothers and sisters. And what's going to interest you, as it definitely interested me, that when you look at this prophecy, you could almost put over the top of Zechariah the Australian or the Sydney Morning Herald or even the dear old Adelaide Advertiser, if you like, because it's a rerun, exactly rerun of what's going on between Israel and the people in the Gaza Strip. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible to see the correspondence of what's happening in the land right here. Here, brothers and sisters, over 1,000 years ago. or was 2,000 years ago. These things are happening. It's happening right under our feet. It's almost a rerun. And you say to yourself, what an amazing God we have. He just portrays this in his book and then shows you on the ground. It's just an incredible thing. So there were the two periods of captivity. And they were going into captivity. Now, what did God tell Jeremiah to tell them? In his 29th chapter, brothers and sisters, this is what he told them. Imagine Israel hearing these words at a time when Nebuchadnezzar was hammering on the doors of their city. And they could hardly believe what Jeremiah, and they didn't believe what Jeremiah was telling them. And he was the prophet, of course, to saw the downfall of that city. Verse 10 and 11. Listen to this. For thus saith Yahweh, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good work towards you, in causing you to return to this place. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith Yahweh, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Imagine God appealing through the prophet. And he knows what the people are saying. The people are abandoning the old hope. They're just so distressed and so stressed out, brothers and sisters. They can't believe, and they don't want to believe Jeremiah. But God said, I know what I think. And they didn't know what God thought. And it behoves us, brothers and sisters, to know what God thinks, because it's revealed in his book. We don't know all God things, of course, but the things which are revealed belong unto us and our children, and we do know. And he said, I'm telling you, I know what I think. I'm going to do this for your good. Do you think, how on earth? What does that mean? 70 years in captivity amongst a brutal nation. Inferior life every day with your children alongside of you. What does he mean? Thoughts of good. Now the other prophet that was with him was Ezekiel. And you see, brothers and sisters, he went to Babylon in the third of those 6 deportations. Now think of this. So when the third lot went to captivity, it was in the reign of Jehoiachin. You see, the last 4 kings of Israel, Jehoahaz reigned for 3 months, and he was the son of Josiah. Then Jehoiakim reigned for 11 years, and he was another son of Josiah. Then after him, Jehoiachin reigned another 3 months, and he was a grandson of Josiah, the son of Jehoiakim. And the last king reigned for another 11 years, and his name was Zedekiah, and he was another son of Josiah. 3 sons of that great man Josiah, who died mercifully in battle before he saw the end of his children, his grandson. And they went 3 months, 11 years, 3 months, 11 years. So it was only about 22, 23 years after his death, or after the end of his reign, that this all happened, brothers and sisters. And it was when Jehoiachin, his grandson, went into captivity, there went in that little group of about 10,000, brothers and sisters, Ezekiel and Mordecai. And they were very, very special to God. They were very special to God. Have a look what Jeremiah says about them in his 24th chapter, brothers and sisters. And Jeremiah got shown this vision. And this is very relevant to Zechariah, extremely relevant to Zechariah. This is a most necessary point of the background. So Jeremiah 24 verses 1 and 2, Yahweh showed me, and behold, 2 baskets of figs were set before the temple of Yahweh, after that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away captive Jeconiah, or Jehoiachin, as his other name is, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and the princes of Judah, with the carpenters, the smiths. So Reg and Liz were okay, and they went from Jerusalem and brought them to Babylon. So when he took that third captivity away, brothers and sisters, he ordered the generals to bring away useful people. People who were tradesmen. They're mentioned again, and several other trades are mentioned. He took away all the tradespeople with Jehoiachin, and there was something unique about Jehoiachin's captivity that was different from the other 5. It was totally unique. Why? Because, brothers and sisters, he did the one thing that he was told to do. He was a wicked king. He was never known to do anything right except one thing. And they all got told to do it. And he's the only one who did. And Jeremiah kept consistently telling him, and Zedekiah brought him in there time and again. Now tell me, what's the word of Yahweh? And he kept saying, I have told you. And he'd bring him in again. He took him on one occasion to a tunnel, into a little tunnel leading from the king's palace to the temple, hiding in the temple, because he didn't want other people to know the king was asking this question. Jeremiah, what's Yahweh saying? I've told you. What was he telling him? Give up. Surrender to the king of Babylon. Nobody would do it. Why? Because Zedekiah said, they'll kill me. They will. I'll go out there, they'll cut me. Jeremiah said, they won't do it. Now that was unreasonable in Zedekiah's mind, brothers and sisters, because you see, normally they would. There were no taking prisoners in those days. They would just slaughter you outside the city. That was the practice. Not in every case, they did take prisoners, but in a lot of cases they slaughtered a lot of people before they did. So nobody was game enough to do it. Until it came to Jeconiah, or Jehoiachin, and his mother, the wife of his father Jehoiakim, persuaded him to walk out. And the two of them walked out together, Mum and her son, the grandson of Josiah, and surrendered to the king of Babylon. And he spent 38 years in captivity. And when the new king, Esarhaddon, came upon the throne in Babylon, he took him out of that jail, brought him into his own house, clothed him in the royal purple, sat him at his table, and he lived in opulence for the rest of his life. A wicked man, but Yahweh was true to his word. And in that special little group, which was the only group that went out on that basis, full of all the useful builders, carpenters, and the blacksmiths, and all the other workers in iron and metal, all of them went to Babylon, that little group, and they were special. And I believe, brothers and sisters, that the prophecy of Haggai and Zechariah, who prophesied together, were largely addressed to that little group that Yahweh said, now go off into Babylon, go there, buy a house, settle down, let your children marry, not outside, but in the truth, marry and find their wives and their husbands in the land, plant your corn and your crops, and I'll be with you, and pray for the peace of Babylon. That's what they were told to do. Imagine a Jew saying that. Pray for the peace of Babylon. Because the peace of Babylon was going to be their security. And they went off, brothers and sisters, with that message. When they got to the land, or rather to Babylon, the people back in the land were sending messages, sending letters across the land with their runners, taking them across to the captivity, saying to them, ha ha ha, you're in captivity, you're the bad boys, we're still here. They said, we're still here, we must be good, we must be the righteous because God's left us here. And Ezekiel had that task, brothers and sisters, to put to death that propaganda. Yahweh said, don't you worry. And they went so far as to say, you know something they said to those in captivity? Abraham was only one man, and God promised him the land. We are many. And they felt that there were so many left in the land that they were X amount more important than Abraham. He was only one. That was the attitude of those people in the land. And Yahweh said to Ezekiel, I'm going to strike you dumb until Jerusalem falls. He couldn't tell them about the disaster that was coming. Now that was all in that little bunch of people going into captivity. Now how did God encourage them, brothers and sisters? And this is the group I believe that in the main would have come back. At least their descendants would have come back in the 43,000 that returned with Zerubbabel and Joshua, with the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. How did he encourage them? Come to Ezekiel 14. Just think about this. Now they're suffering in Babylon the taunts of those left back in Jerusalem. They're being defined as the baddies. You're over there because you're the baddies. Well, this is what God said to them. in the end of Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 22 and 23. Just listen to this. Yet behold, therein shall be left a remnant that shall be brought forth. This he's telling about the return from Babylon. And he's talking to Ezekiel, a member of that third group of people. Yet behold, therein shall be left a remnant that shall be brought forth, both of sons and daughters. Behold, they shall come forth unto you, and ye shall see their way and their doings, and ye shall be comforted concerning the evil that I have brought upon Jerusalem, even concerning all that I brought upon it. And they shall comfort you when you see their ways and their doings, and you shall know that I have not done without cause all that I have done in it, saith the Lord Yahweh. Just think of that. So here we are. Say I'm up here tonight representing someone middle-aged with a group of my children, perhaps even one or two grandchildren. And I'm told I'm going to go off to Babylon for my good by Jeremiah chapter 29. Because Jeremiah says after 70 years I'll come back. 70 years? I'm not going to come back. You'd have to think like that, wouldn't you? I'm perhaps late 40s, 50s, whatever I might be. I'm not going to live till 120, 130. Nobody did. So that rings like a death knell in my mind. What comfort is that to me? What does that do for me? It means when I get taken away and look over my shoulder, that's the very last time I'm going to see my land, my beloved land, the land belonging to the seed of Abraham, the friend of God. Me, goodbye forever. God said, I'm going to bring your children back, and your grandchildren back, and your great-grandchildren back. And one day you're going to see them again. And you're going to learn that I didn't send you off for nothing. I sent you all off for your good. You know what the good was? From the day Israel returned out of Babylon, that new generation, they never, ever, 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 ever practiced idolatry again. It cured them totally. He said, when you see that, you'll know that I haven't done what I've done for nothing. So brothers and sisters, it's a vale of tears, this life. We don't always see our children and grandchildren doing what we would like to do. And we know when we were children, we didn't do it either. But we've learned. We love our children, we want to walk in the right way. And it's not easy. And for some of our members, it's been tough. But God never does anything without a cause and a reason. And in the end, it'll be for our good if we believe in that. If we trust in that, it'll be good. So now I'm the middle-aged person and I hear those words and I breathe a sigh of relief and I think, well, if I've got to die in this land, the cursed land of Babylon, which is my tormentor, I'll die happily. If my children can come out of here, my grandchildren can come out of here, better people. And 43,000 of them went back. And as we read in Psalm 137, they were the crowd that sat down in Babylon and wept. And the Babylonians would come along. What's your Jews? Oh, the Jews in the land. Look at these Jews. Hey, what about a song? What about a song of your land? Hey, there's a song. Tears running down their eye. Their throat parched, brothers and sisters. Words wouldn't come out. How could they sing the songs of Zion in a strange land? Do you know what the Septuagint version entitles Psalm 137? You see, it's a historical anomaly in the Psalms. It doesn't fit the history of the Psalms. It's talking about years after David and Hezekiah. What's it doing in the Psalms? Do you know what the Septuagint version, the title of it is? A Psalm of David for Jeremiah. That's how the Septuagint, where they got it from I don't know. But the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, the Greek Old Testament scriptures, a psalm of David for Jeremiah. And you could almost believe that, couldn't you? A most tragic figure. A tragic, sad, a lonely man, brothers and sisters, whose tears are all over the pages of Lamentations. The Psalm of David for Jeremiah. How can we sing Yahweh's song in a strange land? And that was the background, brothers and sisters, to the return. The day came. Daniel chapter 9. It had to come. 70 years had gone, and there were Bible students in Babylon. And this Bible student was a relation of Hezekiah, Daniel the prophet. He never gave up, brothers and sisters. He's in the last years of his life. He lived to over 90 years of age. We read in the first year of Darius, that's the end of Babylon. Here is Persia back on the scene, brothers and sisters. Persia is in command. Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. In the first year of his reign, I understood by books the number of years whereof the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And I set my face to the Lord Yahweh. Are you praying, brothers and sisters? Are you praying? You don't have to kneel at your bedside to pray. You don't have to be secluded to pray, brothers and sisters. Is your heart praying as you see what we saw on that screen about this great northern juggernaut? Tiny little Israel down there, absolutely vulnerable, no hope in life of surviving. Don't you pray, brothers and sisters? And Jeremiah, here's Daniel, he's down to the Bible, and he's watching what's happening. Babylon has swept off the scene. The river Euphrates has dried up. The Medes and Persians walk in. Darius is on the throne. In no time, Cyrus supersedes him, a man with a big heart, a man who was tolerant towards Israel. And Daniel says, Jeremiah was right. He was right. And he got on his knees and prayed, brothers and sisters, because he thought the kingdom of God had come. And if you read between the lines of Daniel 10 to 12, you'll realise that when you look past or inside the prophetic aspect, you see that Gabriel was sent to him to let him down gradually. Times and a half, 1260. Not going to happen just yet, Daniel. 1292, it's going to be a bit longer. And the angel held up his hands to heaven and said, it'll be a times and a half, 1260. Daniel's watching this in vision. Then it became 1292. Then it became 1335. And the angel held up his hand and swore by him that liveth from ever. And he had his feet on the earth and on the canal. When he held up his hand and swore that it's going to be these times going to lengthen out. And so the angel Gabriel had to say to him in a solemn word to a very sad man, Daniel, he said, you've got to go. Lay to your rest. I'm sorry. It is a terminal epoch, but not what you're thinking about. But don't worry, Daniel. You will stand in your lot in the time. And where are we, brothers and sisters? Where are we in that scheme? I saw a mighty angel come down from heaven, Revelation 10, clothed with the sun, and a rainbow around his head. And he put his right foot on the earth and his left foot on the sea, and lifted up his hands to God and said, time no longer. And that's where we are. And there won't be any Gabriel coming to us and saying, don't worry, oh, sorry about this, you got it all wrong. Won't happen. Because there's never been a time, what we saw on that screen just a minute ago, never has the world seen that of such a magnitude. And it'll come to pass, because the Bible says it will. Putin will have his dream fulfilled. and the angel will come, the mighty Lord Jesus Christ, burning like the sun, with the glorious rainbow around his head, which was given to Noah to guarantee that God's purpose with all men would be fulfilled from horizon to horizon. And he'd lift up his hands. Time will be no longer. That's where we are. And that's what these people had to learn. So Daniel went, brothers and sisters, sorrowfully on his way. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. I don't know how long, but I couldn't imagine it going the next 12 years. I couldn't. It doesn't seem possible, does it? All of that was the background. You know, when you look at the chronology, it's not a lot to learn, and it's not a lot to remember, because our class will encompass, brothers and sisters, this period of time. You see, they came back in BC 536, the decree of Cyrus, Israel returns under the leadership of Zerubbabel, and the altar is built in the 7th month. And the prophecy of Isaiah had foretold that. And Cyrus was called my shepherd, mine anointed. And God would open to him the 2-leaved gates of brass of Babylon. And the city would become inundated, which is exactly what it was. And of course, people say he was a foreign king. How could he be God's shepherd and God's anointed? He was typical of the Lord Jesus Christ. But the thing about Cyrus, brothers and sisters, he went down in history as one of the most revered and respected foreign rulers ever. He has a record almost unblemished of his capacity to sympathise with captives. He completely reversed the way in which the Assyrians operated of depopulating whole nations, carting them away and replacing them with foreign people that they might quell nationalism. He completely reversed that, and he took the nations under captivity, including Israel, and put them back in their own land and encouraged them. And it all just so happened, by sheer luck, some people would think, at the end of the 70 years, that such a man came to the throne and issued a decree that they should go back right at the end of that 70 years prophecy. Well, they went back, and the foundation of the house is laid in the 2nd month, and it met with a mixed reception, as things do among young and old. And when they laid the foundation of that house, it was all there ready to go. Of course, you can picture when you see a foundation of a building, like we saw this one built. You just come here after work and you have a look at the foundation, you can get a pretty fair idea what it's going to be like. The old people looked at it. Oh, heck. Oh, not going to be like Solomon's temple, is it? And they wept. The young people looked at it who had not seen Solomon's temple, and they shouted for joy. And you couldn't hear, they said, the sounds of the cheers for the sounds of the moans and the cries. It met with a mixed reception. And the Samaritan opposition. I'm going to talk about the Samaritans. Interesting. These are the people in the Gaza Strip. I'm not saying nationally, but it's exactly the position. The Samaritan opposition. These were the people that were scattered over there. It wasn't as if there was a nation there, brothers and sisters. The Samaritans just lived around in villages all over the place, and Israel just come and happened to live in this particular area here amongst all these people. They walked with each other. They saw each other every day. It wasn't as if they were lined up to battle. It wasn't like that at all. They were just mingling as ordinary people do. How are you? Oh, he's not a Jew, he's somebody else. And of course they were getting up closer to the city and infiltrating among the people, and it was positively dangerous. And that danger wasn't altogether perceived by some, because it didn't look dangerous initially. And they caused the work to cease because they didn't want this to be built. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, of course, as we go. And then in 529, Cyrus dies, and he's succeeded by Cambyses, his son, and then by Smerdis. Now, this was an incredible point of history. Smerdis was not a true Persian. He was a usurper. And in between the change of the kings, he managed to ingratiate himself to the throne of Persia, and he was a scoundrel. He was a renegade, brothers and sisters. He really was a bad man, and he had no nobility about him whatever. And as soon as he got on that throne, the Samaritans got onto him to stop that work, and he was agreeing to that. And so the work ceased. And in 520, second year of Darius, Haggai and Zechariah came along, and that's where their prophecy commenced. And then Darius issues a new decree favouring the Jews, because now Smyrna was gone. And we'll talk about this history in more detail when we get to it. And then finally, brothers and sisters, the temple was completed and dedicated in 516 BC. Now, if you look at that, it means that all you've got to concentrate upon during the prophecy of Zechariah is 20 years. That's not going to be difficult, is it? We don't need to go any further than that. That's the total period of time we're interested in. When we go beyond that, of course, we get into the work of Nehemiah and Ezra, but we're not concerned with that in our study this time. Our concern here was Zechariah's chronology and Haggai, and that's where it is. So you've only got 20 years to think about, in keeping that in your memory. Now, I don't mind if the secretary wants to run these copies off, that's fine, because we can't leave them up too long for you all to write that down. So if you want them, you sing out, and I'm sure that the secretary will provide that for you. Now, the journey of the exiles from and to Israel. This was the journey, brothers and sisters. 1,300 kilometres, and Ezra made that in 4 months. You see, why am I telling you this? Because you see, if ever there's a study that we're going to embark upon where you and I can become involved personally, it's this one. Because it's about people. It's about real life. It's about making a vivid picture in your mind of the things they had to do and how they lived it. And it's so easy to get yourself into this record because it's so true to nature. Nothing's changed. You see here all the things we combat in life are here in Zechariah and Haggai. They're all there. And they're going on right under our nose over there in Israel and the Gaza Strip. And they're going on here because it's no different. And these people, imagine going across there in chains, being whipped along that road for 1,300 kilometres, taking over 4 months to get there. And then we find, brothers, how many returned? Well, Ezra, in that chapter up there, chapter 2, verses 64 and 67, gives you a detailed account. So there were 42,360 people. There were 7,337 servants. There were 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 asses. About a suburb of people. And I reckon many of them were the descendants of the people that went into captivity with Ezekiel and Mordecai the Jew. All the tradespeople, the builders, and that's what Jerusalem needed. And they were the ones that Yahweh says, you will see one day, I have not done all that I've done for nothing. Now, brothers and sisters, the Samaritans. You don't have to have a history book for the Samaritans. You have a total history of the Samaritans in your Bible. It's in the 2nd of Kings, chapter 17. We're not turning a lot of these references up because I think you people know much about this from Sunday school days. But the 2nd of Kings, chapter 17, is totally the history of the Samaritans. And this is how it went. In BC 721... this was before, of course, we're talking about 536, these people are coming back. But a couple of hundred years before that, the Assyrians removed all the 10 tribes out of the land of Israel and took them up into Assyria and to Nineveh and those areas. And then because the policy of the Assyrians was completely opposite what they did, they replaced them with a mixed population from Babylon. A mixed population of so many nations with 5 different gods. And what happened, brothers and sisters, was this. They got, 2 Kings 17 tells you all of this. When they got back to the land, or they took these people to the land, being of course from a very superstitious area of the world, with all their fuddy-duddy religions. When they got back there, of course, in the interim of taking one population out, replacing it with another, the land would have been a period of time where it was denuded of its inhabitants. And because in those days, the land of Israel was teeming with lions, there was a problem. They were a real problem. They bred down in the Jordan Valley, in the marshes down there, under the brushwood. They bred down there, and they were positively a menace in Israel. The symbol of the lion was well known to the people of Israel. Well, when these people got back there, all these lions are around. And being superstitious, they said, oh, it's the God of the land. We don't know anything about the God of the land. So they sent back to the king of Assyria. They said, listen, you've sent us all back here, but we've been eaten up alive by the lions. We're going to lose one people after another. We've got to learn about the God of the land. So he sent them one Jewish priest who taught them about Yahweh, and they believed it. And it says in the record that they served Yahweh and their other gods as well. So there was in the land a people who had all sorts of queer ideas about religion and who knew about the Israel's God and believed he was just another God. And therefore, brothers and sisters, it says the Jewish priests sent them to teach them about Yahweh, whom they accepted, along with 5 other gods. Do you know what? To this day, they are still in the land. Today, 2011, I have been there and met them. In 1969, a long time ago now, but they're still there. And they have built their civilization there in the middle of the land around Mount Gerizim, where they believe Abraham offered up Isaac. And they claim that the land is theirs, even though they have got an awful difference in their religion to what Israel has, and their belief in the God of Israel is of course corrupted with all sorts of strange rites and practices which they take from the law of Moses. They're still there. Here they are. That appeared in the Jerusalem Post, I don't know, I'm just taking a guess here, maybe a year or two ago. And a law was passed, brothers and sisters, in the land, in the Samaritan villages, that they could no longer marry within their own people. Because one of the things they do is marry within families. Now, I'm not telling you any lies. I was there and saw this. It's the most pathetic sight. You go up at the top of Mount Gerizim, and it's a bare mountain. Now it is. It didn't used to be. And it's got all these roads, rocks. They're real, just pebbles. Fairly big pebbles too. Just rocky roads through this village. And here they are, grown-up men on skateboards, clenching their fists like this, using them to propel themselves along a dirt road full of pebbles and rocks, and they're dumb mutes. And they're kneeling on the skateboard, going like this. Now, I'm not imitating those people to belittle them, brothers and sisters. I don't want to do that. I don't mean it to do it that way, but I want to tell you, that's what happens to them when they marry in families. That article in the Jerusalem Post says that they passed a law among the Samaritans. They no longer can do that. They have to go to Europe now, like that gentleman down there with his wife there. She's a European from the Netherlands. They had to go there, and they've got to bring back a wife from Europe that has no bloodlines connected with them, because they now know that whole race would become totally incapable of thought or anything. It is the most pathetic thing to see. But I want you to notice, I'm going to put a bigger version of that up here. Do that again. Persecuted by the Assyrians about the time of the Babylonian exile of the Jews. Now listen to this. Throughout history, Samaritans have claimed their beliefs were the true religion of the ancient Israelites. That started in 2 Kings chapter 17, and it's alive in your day. No, they were the people among whom Zechariah and Haggai had to contend. And many of them genuinely believed they had the truth. How did the prophets deal with them? Well, we're not going to quote you the prophets themselves, but let's just quote you the words of Nehemiah. This is how he dealt with the problem. Then answered I, this is Nehemiah, then answered I them and said unto them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us, therefore we his servants will arise and build, but you have no portion, nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem. Now that's got to be our attitude, brothers and sisters, in 2011. Because Israel has still got those Samaritans in the land today, plus the Palestinians to deal with as well, all of whom claim a relationship to the land in one way or another, and these people claim that they have the same right as the Jewish people. How did Jesus answer the woman of Samaria? And she had 5 husbands, just as they had 5 gods. You worship, you know not what. And the Lord, brothers and sisters, was above sarcasm. He wasn't being sarcastic. He wasn't being derogatory. It was a fact. The poor lady was mixed up. And we read that today. And you know what he did to her? You know, we quote those words of the Lord. They that worship the Father must worship him in spirit and in truth. And we apply that at lectures to say we've got to believe the right doctrines. I'll go along with that. No problem with that with me. That's not really contextually how he used it. That's not what he meant. You see, he knew he had this ability, brothers and sisters, which we don't have. It couldn't have been done any other way. He read straight through that woman. He saw what she was like. She lived an immoral life. She was on her 5th husband. But she knew it. And she deplored that fact. She wasn't proud of that. How do we know that? Because Jesus knew it. He could read her mind. So he said to the woman, go and get your husband. Now, he said that deliberately. What did she say? I have no husband. If you'd have heard that, I'd have heard that, and we knew, by somebody else telling us, that you'd had 5 husbands, we'd mutter under our breath, liar. No, brothers and sisters. Listen to how the Lord answered her. Just listen. They that worship the Father must worship him in spirit, attitude, and truth. Thou hast well said, I have no husband. In that saidest thou truly. Lady, the Father's looking for people like you, despite her immorality. They that worship the Father must worship him with a right attitude and be truthful. You have said it well, and you've said it truly. I think that is just incredible. And that's how the Lord dealt with these Samaritans. But he didn't concede, brothers and sisters, that they had any right or any portion or any memorial in Jerusalem. Now, brothers and sisters, let me tell you, there is abroad everywhere a spirit of the ecumenical movement. You know, let's all be melded into one great Christian society. That's been going on for years with the Anglicans and the Roman Catholics and all the daughters of the mother of harlots, all of them trying somehow to maintain something like their own independence and identity, and yet longing to be part of a great swelling mass of all brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. We all love Jesus. What do we need, therefore, to have these differences between opinions of what we believe? And as Christadelphians, we've stood unique from that. We have a closed fellowship. You're in it, aren't you? You get baptised, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, brothers and sisters. We have not got the choice to have a little difference of opinion about what is fundamental. We haven't got that choice. We gave our allegiance to God in the waters of baptism. We said that we would worship him not only with the right attitude, but truthfully. And we maintain that that truth, as can be best written out by a man, at any rate in this generation or any other generation, is expressed in our Birmingham amended statement of faith. That is no longer being said in our brotherhood. That is being challenged. Believe me, it's being challenged, brothers and sisters. They're not on a small scale. And we will not have that here. It will not be tolerated here. And when these ecclesias in our country were brought together in unity in 1958 by the magnificent work of Brother Carter, and I was there, brothers and sisters, as a personal witness, as a representative of this ecclesia at the age of 27, and I remember almost every word that was said because I had a tremendous interest. I was no influence, I was too young, but I was deadly keen to find out. And I can witness to what went on, and it has been said. And I want you to never forget this and stand up for it, that because it says in our unity agreement, in the unity book, that the use of this agreement does not preclude the use of any other adequate statement of faith, that people have said that our unity agreement could be expressed in other statements of faith. Well, that is true if the statements of faith were identical, even the same words were a bit different, but identical in belief. But you wouldn't need two of them, would you, if they meant the same? If that one says this one way and it says the same thing another way, just choose the one that says it better. And I can tell you as a personal witness, without any equivocation whatever, never, ever, 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 ever would have said in my hearing at that time, and I was hearing across the borders, that we would ever have any other statement of faith. And that's got to be put to rest once and for all, because it's being used, brothers and sisters, that we might have two of them. It never, ever got mentioned. And because I not only know that, I know also, and was extremely close to the personalities who are now resting with their fathers, waiting for the resurrection. I know the character of those brethren, that if another statement of faith was ever even suggested, it would never have got above the ground. It would never have seen the light of day. No one would ever have tolerated that. And you meet today, you young people, with the tremendous heritage of what was defended here in those days by very great men who loved God. They were brilliant students of the Word. They lived the truth. They were true pioneers of our faith. And they would never have allowed that. And we, their children, have come forth to now live under the umbrella of what is secure and safe, because we won't tolerate any differences. And true unity, brothers and sisters, comes because you won't. And that's where we came from. So this was going on in the land. It's going on in the land today, where people who have other ideas about religion claim to be Christian or related to the land, Arabs through Ishmael and so forth. But our God, brothers and sisters, happens to be the God of Israel. And all the world will take hold of the skirt of a Jew and say, we'll go with you because you've got the truth. They haven't got it now, but we've got the hope of Israel. I think it's absolutely marvellous that we've got that. Well, brothers and sisters, the chronologies of the prophecies of Haggai and Zechariah. As we've seen, they were prophesying in the second year of Darius, BC 520. In the first year, in the 6th month, Haggai is a call to work. He's the first one to open his prophecy. He was the second one also. On the 24th day of the 6th month, the people respond, and all this, of course, is in the book of Haggai. In the 21st day of the 7th month, we have his third prophecy, the future glory of the temple. And then at last, of course, we get into Zechariah's prophecy, that in the 8th month, we don't get a day for that one, there's an appeal to turn to God, which will occupy the first 6 verses. Then Haggai again in the 24th day of the 9th month. This is all in the second year. we get the Haggai chapter 2 verses 10 to 19, the immediate blessings of serving God. The blessings we get today by serving God. And then again Haggai, in his 24th day of the 9th month, the same day actually, his other prophecy comes that there are future blessings in serving God. And then Zechariah, in the 24th day of the 11th month, has that brilliant, brilliant night. A night never to be forgotten, when 7 very graphic visions were flashed before his mind. Very graphic they were. And he saw that in one night. And it inspired him, brothers and sisters, to write as he did. Now, what were they like, the prophets? Well, I didn't actually take a photo of them, that's real. But I'm trying to illustrate there that it's pretty obvious that Haggai was the older and Zechariah was the younger. But the reason we have here that Haggai, for example, appears to have seen the temple in its future glory, because he says that. And then he says, consider your ways. So he was the older man, brothers and sisters, and his prophecy is not apocalyptic. It's not the apocalypse of the Old Testament. It's just a practical prophecy. Simple, straightforward, practical issues, like you would expect from an old man who has the years of experience, and he doesn't need always to get up and inspire the people with great visions, but people listen to him because of what he is. And he just says, hey, look, this is the way to go. And he's an older man, and you respect that. That was Haggai. But Zechariah was a younger man. His grandfather, Iddo, returned to the land with Zerubbabel. So he is younger. He is younger, brothers and sisters. And what did Haggai tell the people? The people had relaxed from the work of God. You see, the Samaritan opposition had brought that to a standstill. And they worked it out. They said, oh, okay, 70 years from the captivity is up here. But of course, if you take the 70 years from the temple being burnt, say from BC 606 to 586, there's a few years to go yet. So the time has not yet come to build the house of Yahweh. Down went the tools, because the Samaritans were too hard to cope with. They were being goaded every day, got sick of that. Down with the tools. Well, we're really going to fulfil prophecy a bit later. And they went home to work, and they got their crops and that going, brothers and sisters, and tilled their land. And guess what? The crops failed. And when they sold anything and got their silver and gold, guess what? The bag had holes in it that went straight through, like your budget in your house. If you don't do the right thing, your money just disappears and you don't know where it's gone. That's what happened to them. So Haggai prophesied, he said, so some were disappointed with the project even. So he got them back to work. Then he talked to those people who cried because they saw this poor work. And his message to them was, brothers and sisters, what are you crying for? Oh, it's nothing like Solomon said, well, you know, mate, I expected something better than this. He says, listen, go up to the mountains and get a piece of wood. Just a piece of wood. And stick it in the ground or something. Do something. God doesn't care what the building looks like. He cares about your attitude in doing it. You know, brothers and sisters, that's a great exhortation for all of us. We all want to do the spectacular thing, don't we? We all want to do that. It's nice to do a spectacular thing. It's nice to be told this and told that you're doing wonderful work. But we're not all capable. It's a fact of life. Don't despair about that. God's not one bit interested. We've had brethren do spectacular work today that are in ruins, morally. God doesn't expect to do us all the spectacular work. What God wants, brothers and sisters, to do what you can the best way you can. And I'll guarantee you that we're going to see people in the kingdom of God who were also rams in the meeting up the front, and those who may have been a bit spectacular, perhaps all in the truth, but a little way back, because the attitude of that brother, he did the utmost to what he or she had been given to them. They used it to the utmost. Well, I know brethren who have a lot of ability, who make a lot of excuses, but they can't do it. It's not what you do. It's not how spectacular it is, brothers and sisters. You do what you can with what you got. That's all God expects. And if you fill your capacity, then that is greater than those with greater ability who don't. That was the message of Haggai. And the motive was not material success. It's not the important thing, brothers and sisters. That's what they thought. That's why he told them. You got shot off from the temple site. You couldn't wait to get home fast enough. We're down tools because I would come back a few years later for the next 70 years, not fulfilled yet, and you thought you were going to make a fortune. Well, they didn't. And then, brothers and sisters, he exhorted them that their efforts in the day of small things was an enormous investment in the future. You think about that. You think about the judgment seat of Christ. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. So you only got 1 talent. There's a brother up in front of you who had 10. And he made 10 more. Great. You only had 1, so you're going to be a bit lower than him. No, you made the talent. You did as well as he did. And you all got the same reward. In the parable of the pounds, you didn't. Because all the pound signified was the truth. Some do better in the truth and some don't. And yet the rewards are disproportionate. So God rewards effort in the truth. He does not reward ability. He does not reward ability. The talent people all got the same. So it wasn't the ability he awarded. It was the capacity they used with what they had. And that's what Zechariah said. So it's a day of small things. It's not spectacular. It's not like Solomon's temple. You feel let down. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Because the latter glory of this house will supersede all that Solomon ever built. What you're doing is make an investment for the future with the work that you can do in ever such a small way. Now, Zechariah, his name means Yah hath remembered. He was the son of Berechiah, Yah hath blessed. And his granddad was Iddo at the appointed time. I know, there's a lot of people make all sorts of things out of names. I don't think you could say that's haphazard. Yahweh remembered, hasn't he, the 70 years. The time has come for him to bless. It's the appointed time. That's the meaning of his name. And as I say, Iddo was his grandfather who returned under Zerubbabel. Now just finally, brothers and sisters, so that we set the whole seal for the prophecy of Zechariah, the divisions of the prophecy. Chapters 1, verses 1 to 6, exhortation not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Chapter 1, 7 to 6, 8, the night of the 7 visions. And here they are, the horsemen among the myrtle trees, the 4 horns and the 4 carpenters confronting each other, young man about to measure Jerusalem, the elevation of Joshua the high priest, I love that one, the 2 golden lampstands and the 2 olive trees, the flying scroll carried to the land of Shinar, the chariots from between the mountains of brass. I've got to get rid of that E in the middle there. The chariots, the 4 chariots between the mountains of brass. They saw that in one night. Imagine it. Why would God do that? Well, you see, he was a young man, wasn't he? Younger man. Young people can do that. I could do that was young, and I can't do that now. You can get hold of a young fellow if he's bright enough and he's keen enough. You can pump him full of the Bible. He'll remember it. He will. And it'll live with him. You get older, you don't remember it. So Zechariah gets all this stuff into his head that was just swirling around there. Now, God did that all initially because as he unfolded the plan to Zechariah, it all had relevance. Later on, the words come back, I remember that vision, I remember that vision, I remember that vision. And it all had relevance to what was happening about him. Plus, it was springing him forward to the future. Magnificent, just magnificent the way that was done. Now, continuing the divisions. In chapter 7, verses 1 to 14, he receives a deputation from Bethel seeking information about the continuing fast of mourning. Gee, that's interesting when you see that done. You see what happened when these 2 chaps, Regem, Melech and Shereja, come down from the north to talk to Zechariah about should we go on, exercising the fast, and mourning for the fall of Jerusalem. Now we're all back again. We're all happy that, the time is over for mourning. You know the answer they got? God said, go back to them and say, was you mourning? I wasn't aware. God never heard him for 70 years. Can you imagine their mouth falling open? Really? You know, we must stop mourning now, you know, because, oh, you mourning, were you? Wow. Imagine. That's like being told of the judgment seat. Lord, I prayed to be saved. Were you praying, were you? Well, I never heard. Now, God will hear our prayers, we know that. But not, brothers and sisters, if we turn aside from Him, He won't. That's what happened here. Anyway, we'll talk when we get there. Chapter 8, verses 1 to 23. The future security and glory of Jerusalem. Boys and girls playing in the streets. What? In that day and generation in which they live? See? It was all relevant to those visions that he saw. The contrast between the arrogant destroyer of the people and the saviour of Israel. The 4 horns and the 4 carpenters. The good shepherd and the foolish shepherd. You know, the truth in Israel and the falsity among the Samaritans. The latter-day crisis for Jerusalem. The revelation of Messiah to a repentant nation. And we know the last one, Armageddon, and the establishment of universal worship in Jerusalem. Well, brothers and sisters, that is our introduction to Zechariah, and God willing we'll plunge into that prophecy next time.